Hello, my dear friends. You're in the RFR News channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the Russia-Ukraine war. We have a lot of very interesting updates today about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, significant number of details, geolocations, and so on from the Ukraine battlefield update. So let's start with this Ukraine war situation report. Now let's talk about very interesting incident in western Ukraine that relates to Ukraine war truth about internal problems. A 37-year-old man, reportedly a deserter from the Ukrainian armed forces, detonated a grenade in the town of Rudki near Lviv during a confrontation with two police officers and two shopping mall employees. So this is very serious incident related to Russia-Ukraine mobilization problems. The explosion occurred near a car while the man was talking to the officers and employees, so he detonated grenade during conversation. Something like this. Authorities confirmed the incident and the man was apprehended, so he survived and was arrested. The motives behind the grenade detonation remain under investigation by the police, so we don't know exactly why he did this. Maybe he was trying to escape, maybe he was trying to kill himself, who knows. This event adds to the growing concerns over military desertions and increasing incidents involving armed individuals within Ukraine, highlighting the complex challenges faced on the home front amid the ongoing conflict. So we see that desertion is a very serious problem for Ukrainian armed forces, and some deserters are ready to use weapons against police. Now let's talk about Myrnorad in this Ukrainian armed forces update, because the Ukrainian armed forces have begun a gradual withdrawal from the southern parts of Myrnorad and the surrounding cauldron, with military analysts confirming that a large area south of the city has been abandoned, so Ukrainians are withdrawing from this area. The southern sector of the city and the settlement of Suky Yar have been nearly completely relinquished by Ukrainian troops according to enemy sources, so we have confirmations from multiple sources about Ukrainian withdrawal. This withdrawal comes after weeks of intense fighting in the contested region between Pokrovsk and Myrnorad. So this is result of very heavy fighting, something like this, in the Donetsk direction. The thing is that already as early as a week ago, Ukrainian forces started pulling back their positions in the areas of Novopavlovka and Suky Yar, which lie in the corridor connecting Pokrovsk and Myrnorad. So this withdrawal was planned. This was not panic retreat. The intent behind this maneuver appears to be an organized retreat to avoid complete encirclement and reduce casualties, while regrouping for further defensive operations. So Ukrainians are trying to save their forces. Russian forces have been steadily advancing in southeastern Pokrovsk and marginally in southeastern Myrnorad, pressuring Ukrainian defensive lines. Despite the tactical withdrawals by Ukraine, fighting remains fierce, with Ukrainian counterattacks aimed at securing northern flanks and delaying Russian consolidation. The situation reflects a complex, multi-layered struggle to maintain control over strategic towns in Donetsk Oblast amid sustained Russian offensives, so the situation is very complicated, very difficult for Ukrainian forces in this Ukraine collapse prediction area. Now let's move to another very interesting update in this Russia-Ukraine news today. And we're going to talk about power situation in Donetsk People's Republic. The Donetsk People's Republic, DPR, including its capital Donetsk and the city of Makiivka, is currently experiencing a major power outage due to Ukrainian attacks on critical infrastructure. So we see that Ukrainians are targeting energy infrastructure in DPR as part of their operations. According to reports, Ukraine drone attacks targeted several key electrical substations across the DPR, including the Chaikin substation in Donetsk and facilities in Makiivka, so multiple substations were targeted simultaneously. As a result of these attacks, large parts of Donetsk and nearby towns such as Yasinuvata and the Chervonovardiesky district of Makiivka have been left without electricity, so significant parts of DPR are without power in this Ukraine latest news. The thing is that the disruption has also affected mobile internet services across the region, causing communication difficulties. So not just electricity, but also communications are affected. The Ukrainian armed forces have intensified their use of drone and missile strikes on power infrastructure as part of their operations. Consequently, substations and transformer units have automatically shut down for safety, leaving thousands of consumers without power. So we're talking about thousands of people without electricity, something like this. And we have another very important update about Pokrovsk in this Ukraine war deep analysis, because Russian forces have made a significant breakthrough 3 kilometers north of Pokrovsk, advancing beyond the city and cutting off all last escape routes for Ukrainian troops. So, this is very critical development, showing the Ukraine situation worsening. The operational group known as Center employed attack aircraft to support this advancement. They secured a key location on Olympiyskaya Street, effectively blocking evacuation and resupply routes for the Ukrainian defenders still fighting inside and around Pokrovsk. So Russians are cutting escape routes, something like this. Open source intelligence, OSINT sources, monitored by enemy observers, have geolocated footage confirming Russian infantry presence at this distance north of the city, so we have geolocated confirmations of Russian progress in this frontline update. This encirclement tightens the siege, putting the Ukrainian armed forces in an increasingly precarious position with limited options for maneuver or retreat. So the situation for Ukrainian forces in Pokrovsk is very critical, very difficult, I would say. Despite the intensifying pressure and significant Russian territorial gains in this area, Ukrainian command has emphasized the priority of protecting their forces, potentially including a tactical withdrawal, if defending the city becomes unsustainable. So, Ukrainians are considering withdrawal from Pokrovsk. Now let's move to the line of combat contact in this Ukraine frontline map update, and we're going to talk about Novopavlovka in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Russian forces, specifically a Pegasus crew from the 400th Regiment, are actively engaged in an offensive operation near Novopavlovka as part of the Russian offensive update, so we have specific information about units that are involved in this operation. They have been reported to be destroying Ukrainian armed forces positions in this area. The offensive around Novopavlovka has been intense, with Russian troops reportedly entering the southern and eastern parts of the settlement, advancing their control, so Russians are making progress in this direction, in what could be part of the Ukraine frontline collapsing in some sectors. The thing is that the 400th Regiment's actions are part of a larger Russian effort involving several mechanized brigades transferred to the Novopavlovka sector to strengthen the offensive, so this is not just one regiment, this is like coordinated effort with multiple brigades, something like this, showing Russian troop movements in this area. This offensive aims to seize and solidify control over strategic points in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, cutting supply routes and weakening Ukrainian defense lines. So the strategic goal is to cut Ukrainian supply routes. Despite counterattacks by Ukrainian forces, the Russian assault, supported by armored units and drone strikes, has continued to push forward in this contested region. So Ukrainians are trying to counterattack, but Russians continue advancing. And first we're going to talk about probably the most important update today in this Ukraine war update, and we're going to discuss the situation in Pokrovsk, Ukraine, because the situation is dire, as Russian forces have nearly encircled the city on three sides, in what analysts are calling a major Russian breakthrough, with significant fighting and heavy losses reported for the Ukrainian army. So this is very critical situation in this Pokrovsk battle update, something like this. The thing is that Russian troops have effectively entered and begun to control the city of Pokrovsk after a protracted battle lasting over 18 months. So we're talking about very long battle, one of the longest battles in this Russia military operation, I would say, and this is definitely part of the new Russian offensive that many Ukraine war experts have been analyzing. The city's strategic importance lies in its role as a key logistical hub and a gateway for further Russian advances toward Ukrainian-held cities like Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. So this is not just about Pokrovsk, this is about opening the way to much bigger cities. Something like this. And this relates to Russian strategic objectives in the Donetsk fighting update direction. Despite the encirclement and the pressure from Russian attacks, including drone and missile strikes, Ukrainian forces continue to resist in surrounding fortified towns northeast of the Donetsk People's Republic, DPR, so there is still resistance. The battle is not finished completely yet. The thing is that the loss of Pokrovsk and nearby Mirnorad is considered significant but not a decisive turning point in the war, as fighting in the region is expected to continue. So even if Russians capture Pokrovsk, the war will continue, obviously, and this is part of the Ukraine war reality check that we need to understand. Analysts suggest that the outcome of current engagements and Ukrainian counterattacks will influence the next phase of the conflict. So, we'll see what happens next, something like this, and many people providing Ukraine war military analysis are watching this closely. The battle has been extremely costly for both sides, with reports of substantial casualties according to the Russian MOD report, so both sides are suffering significant losses. Russian forces have used infiltration tactics and relentless attacks to gain ground with Russian troop movements, but Ukrainian troops have also inflicted heavy losses and mounted defensive operations to slow Russian advances.